How do young children learn? Our belief is that children learn through multimodal play in rich, student-centered environments that inspire interaction, discovery, and connections. We will be supporting this by research and our experiences. Our real problem is, what is the goal of education? Are we forming children that are only capable of learning what is already known? Or should we try developing creative and innovative minds, capable of discovery from the preschool age on? Diving into the Reggio Emilia approach, there are 7 guiding approaches involved. The first one is, children are capable of constructing their own learning. Then, children are collaborators and learn through interaction within their communities. Children are natural communicators and should be encouraged to express themselves however they feel they can. The classroom environment acts as a third teacher. The teacher are partners, nurturers, and guides who help facilitate the exploration of children's interests as they work on short and long-term projects. Documentation is a critical component of communication. And lastly, parents are partners in education. Children in Reggio Emilia programs are promoted to express their knowledge and their own ideas using visual, graphic, or symbolic languages as a form of communication. While the Reggio Emilia approach supports Piaget's idea of constructionism, in this approach, knowledge is not constructed solely in isolation, but also through social learning. Piaget's stage theory focuses on 4 different stages. First, the sensomotor stage, which is from birth to ages of 2. Infants understand the world through the information they take in through their senses and their actions on it. Secondly, there is the peripronational stage, ages 2 to 7. Young children can use mental symbols, but do not yet think logically, and their thinking is egocentric. Next up is the concrete operation stage, what happens during ages 7 to 12, and is when children know to think logically, but they're concrete and not abstract. Lastly, the formal operational stage. Children 12 years and older can think both logically and abstractly.
Learning is through play. Research shows that learning through play is vast and improves the quality of thinking, problem solving, and self-regulation in children. What this looks like for children is that learning is active. Children are involved in their learning, they're moving their bodies and engaged in the activity. It involves children exploring objects and concepts, problems, language, and relationships. It's student-centered and inventive, so students are trying theories, testing, failing, making discoveries, and negotiating with others. It's also fun. Play is fun, so learning is fun, and it's personal. The child directs where they want to go. For teachers, this means that learning can be messy. Children are all over the place doing different things, and it may not always be evident that they're learning. Teachers need to incorporate literacy and numeracy into the play and looking for those opportunities to create invitations and provocations for that learning and that third space. It also means creating a safe space with boundaries and guiding and facilitating children through their learning. Professor Doris Frumbridge says we need to consider that young children learn in quite different ways. They learn by comparing physical experiences, by interactions with other people, and their own feelings. They learn an enormous amount through their imagination, but play is what pulls together both the logical and creative parts of the brain. Learning is also multimodal. Research shows that children learn through different modes, and using these multiple modes reinforces knowledge comprehension. So what this looks like for children learning is that it's inclusive. It's using all of your senses, physical, audio, visual, for learning to happen. And it incorporates many different diverse ways of making meaning. So we all make meaning in different ways, and this allows for students to do that. For teachers, this means incorporating variety into lessons and using universal design for learning to create different entry points for the students in their classroom. That makes it representative and culturally responsive to have all of these different modes and multiple avenues for literacy, so children's way of knowing and learning from their own cultural background is recognized and represented in the classroom.
Interactive and emergent learning both rely on social interactions as a means to increase engagement and understanding in how student identities can intersect with their learning. Students are socialized in the classroom as they are able to learn from one another, as well as from a responsive environment that is centered around their interests. In practice, students should feel comfortable in sharing their own experiences and their knowledge, and should be encouraged to engage with different modes than they're used to in order to fully explore their environment. For teachers, they should actively work to understand the interests and experiences of students and be able to creatively interpret them into an environment in which their students can excel through varying effective modes. This is beneficial for students as it allows for opportunities to gain a deeper understanding of concepts as well as the diversity present among them. Interdisciplinary learning allows students to dive deeper into issues as they are able to make connections among typically stagnant disciplines and apply them to real-world problems. For students, this learning involves being open-minded as they work to incorporate their own knowledge as well as listen to the opinions of others. For teachers, this requires creating an environment in which students feel safe to share their opinions, posing open-ended problems that allow for endless interpretations, and presenting familiar concepts or objects in unfamiliar ways to allow students to explore them from a different perspective. Overall, this helps students to further develop critical thinking skills and to understand how knowledge can be transferable throughout their education and in their day-to-day lives.
There are many coherent forms of play-based activities available for educators to adapt and apply. One activity that was observed in a grade 1 classroom during field experience perfectly fits within the framework for what we believe is how young children should learn. The teacher had implemented quite an engaging and ingenious teaching strategy for sight words using Play-Doh. Once their students acquired recognition and familiarity with the sight words they were learning in a given week, the teacher provided each student with a Play-Doh tub, which they then used to sculpt the sight words they had learned. When each word is called out, students were asked to spell or make something that visually represents the word using the clay. Emphasis is placed on each student creating something impressionable and unique to them to be more susceptible to recall it. For example, some students would portray the word go by making a car or bike, whereas see would be glasses or binoculars. The teacher would then ask the class to share their creations, with one exception. Each student is required to say their respective sight word correlated with their creation in their answer. For example, in the case of the word one, students would have to say, I made one person, rather than I made a person, for instance. As a reward for completing the lesson, students were given a couple of minutes of free time to do whatever they please with the Play-Doh. This activity encompasses how children learn as it is play-based and multimodal. It's interactive as it allows children to demonstrate their knowledge using a form of toy literacy, and most importantly, it's open-ended. There's no wrong way a student can express their answer. In addition, the activity aligns itself with the general outcomes for Grade 1 as outlined in the Alberta Program of Studies. The activity promotes student listening, speaking, reading, and writing all in one. It explores and uses different means of producing text, helps students identify high-frequency words by sight, and allows them to experiment with letters, sounds, words, and word patterns to learn new words.
What children learn does not follow as an automatic result from what is taught. Rather, it is in large part due to the children's own doing as a consequence of their activities and our resources. A quote by Loris Malaguzzi. We feel that this quote is a summative representation of our position. As all of these methods reflect, learning is very student-centered and led. As educators, we can provide a foundation and a safe environment for students, but learning in itself comes when students are able to interact with others, explore and interpret their surroundings by using their imagination, reflect on their individual identities, and use these findings to make connections that can be applied to pressing issues.